Okay, perfect. So I think we got enough attendees. So what we'll do is like we'll also do a recording of this particular meeting. So we'll send it out to everyone. But yeah, welcome to SUSE Adfinis Multi-Linux Manager webinar. So what we'll do is in today's webinar, we'll present to you SUSE Manager and how we see it being used. So on the call today, we have Michael Bookver from SUSE. So he's like our sales engineer based in Sydney. And then as well as like on the call, we have Alton. So Alton's our systems engineer based in Brisbane. So he'll be going through like the actual demo of SUSE Manager. So pretty much like how can we look at setting it up quickly, as well as looking at a lot of the key items that we think could be of use. So a lot of it's like feature flags as well. So without further ado, Michael, do you want to kickstart it all?
Sure. Guys, how's my voice sounding? Loud and clear?
Perfect.
Great. Stephen, Olsen, yeah, thanks for setting this up. Everybody else, thanks for jumping on the call today. As Stephen said, Michael Bookfer, solution architect, sales engineer, pre-sales guy, working for SUSE for the last 8 years out of Sydney, working with customers from all across Australia and New Zealand. And I see we do have people from all over that geography on today, so that's great. We're here today to talk about Multi-Linux Manager, which some of you may know as SUSE Manager. We thought we'd give it a name that was much more lined up with the function that it actually did, and with SUSE's actual philosophy, which is, we make a Linux, but we manage lots of them. And that's something we do particularly different to other vendors out there who tend to want to put you down a particular stovepipe. We're also about giving people the right tools for the right jobs. And I hope what you'll see here today is specifically how SUSE Manager can help you with a lot of those VM and physical machine type systems that you have today in terms of operational efficiency, in terms of some features to do with controlling patches and packages and how you can do that at scale when you have lots of systems around. I'll talk a little bit about some of the core functionality that drives us being able to control complex systems. And then Alton will hop into a really cool live demo of a bunch of stuff. So without further ado, what is it? Why should you care? Who are we here to talk to today? It's really about it's about ops, and in my own language, the way I see it, we talk a lot in the industry about pets and cattle, and if you're in a cloud native world, you're trying to automate away the OS to some extent. You don't patch it, you reboot and rebuild a completely new image all the time. There are hundreds of thousands of VMs and systems out there that aren't amenable to that kind of approach. Even as we drive a lot of new workloads down that approach, we still need to manage the stuff that we have, and we need to manage it for a lot of years. And this management of complex things is kind of where SUSE Manager really shines, where its design center is. And from a SUSE perspective, where we've taken it, it's not just about our Linux, but about managing lots of other people's Linuxes. So you can get the maximum benefit from saving money on keeping the lights on type stuff. And then perhaps you can redirect that investment to some of the cloud native type of development. 10,000 foot view. Let's reduce altitude a little bit here and start talking about things. The mission is here for those kinds of systems, to help you deploy them, secure them, update them, manage, monitor, and compliance audit them in terms of where they're at, where they're staying, what's happened with their configurations, and things like that. And to do that across, this picture is a few months old. It's already out of date. We keep adding distributions that we support. I keep getting surprised every time I see someone's come out and said, I've got 1,000 instances of Blurt. Could you please add support for that to SUSE Multi-Linux Manager? Because I love using it for my other Linuxes. I want to use it for that too. What it is basically to take you through all these functional areas particularly with a focus on the things that cause people the most grief. Packages, patches, configuration management, because those are the things that for complex systems that people want to make sure they have, that they've done consistently, which means that things are going to be as secure as they can be. They want to know that the settings are correct as they have to be, so that they're compliant, basically. And to some extent, they also want to look after monitoring these things and getting alerts and stuff from them. But we're also conscious that people have other tools in their environment that do some of those things as well. So once again, with that philosophy of the right tool for the right job, while we do all of these things, where we normally find the real hot button is for everybody is how do I just make sure that the patches that I'm applying are consistent, and how do I do that across dev, test, prod, QA, and a whole bunch of different environments that might have a lot of systems in them, and it could be deployed anywhere in the cloud or on an edge environment and stuff like that. And how do I also make sure that configuration settings are both what they should be to start off with, and that somewhat inevitably, when systems are managed as pets, people have access. What that means is things will drift, and we want to know about that. We want to be able to correct that, or at least audit for it, so that we know we need to action it. So that's kind of where we're coming from. The other place that SUSE comes from, and I need to mention it right up front, is we are a 100% open source company. So SUSE Multi-Linux Manager has an upstream project called the Uni. If you want to see some of the things that will be in the next releases of Multi-Linux Manager, you can go and have a look at the upstream project, which is out there as other open source projects are. And that feeds into what we deliver as a commercial subscription. So as my manager likes to say sometimes, we sell free stuff, which means we sell support subscriptions, and expertise and insurance and fixes and delivered in time for something that's an open source base that we curate and assure delivery of. I've talked about some of this, and we're going to go into more detail on this. It's infrastructure security compliance for your mixed enterprise Linux estate. We give you a single console. We also give you a complete API. We have customers who call features of SUSE Manager, SUSE Multi-Linux Manager. I still use both names, old and new. From other tools, we have people who call other tools from SUSE Multi-Linux Manager, and you'll see examples of both of those things. So, scale is a funny old thing. You can have 10 really complicated systems, or you can have 100,000 really simple things that you kind of are trying to herd, and they're still pets. And we want to keep these things healthy and current. The point for me is, automation is, I guess, one of those. It's been a hot button for a long time. It's part of the answer, but for complicated systems, it's not the complete answer. You need to be able to schedule things, not just to automate them, and you need to be able to view, a complex state and control complex state over time. So the first piece we do, obviously, with any management system, we need a way of onboarding things. We need to be able to tell you what you have, what's running there. We need to give you a rough idea of where you're sitting with your subscription count versus, say, the number of systems you have. And we need to give you a bunch of different ways and rich ways of classifying systems. Sometimes you want to look at systems by OS. Sometimes you want to look at it by, is it dev, test, or QA? Other times you want to go, oh, what are all the systems that are there? What are all the systems that are there? And all these things overlap. It's not one or the other. So there is that capability within the UI. We give you a provisioning capability, traditional Pixie boot, install disk, USB key type stuff. We let you drive, from a SUSE Linux perspective, upgrades that go from one service pack to another. Depending on where you are, you can actually skip a service pack or two. But the thing that most people do is they spend time managing and scheduling the patches and the packages over time for all our systems. So with the package management, we're talking about the software that you subscribe to in terms of, this is my Linux version, plus here are the repos that I own on site. Here are the third-party repos, and I want that all to be part of the definition of this system. And I want to make sure that all the systems that I call test have the right repos attached to them. And you know what? Occasionally, I need to have like an emergency, repo that I can attach because I need to, out of cycle, apply a really urgent security patch. So we give you that framework for managing both packages and patches. From a patch point of view, we give you, a whole bunch of fine-grained control on definition of what and when and where, and through what kind of steps you want to control this sort of thing. So, I'm talking about a lot of functionality here. Where do people start with this? Well, one customer came to me and they said, hey, I had a cluster for my SAP HANA, whatever it was. I was applying patches, serially to the different nodes on it. And, to my horror, I realized that in between the time I patched node 1 and node 3 of the cluster, the versions of the patch had changed that I was getting from, scc.suse.com. And suddenly, my cluster was, differently patched, and I was a bit concerned. But the point is, they had to go back and fix that, and we don't want that to happen. We want to create secured, guaranteed baselines of this stuff, and then we want to apply that in a really controlled way. And we can attach things like, the whole configuration piece of, I can't SSH's root to a system. We can do that kind of stuff and attach that configuration control to these control baselines. Ultimately, this is important because we're trying to make security easier. Making security easier, means you have to spend less time doing it, and you can do other things that bring more direct value to your business. We're trying to make managing lots of different Linux distributions simple. Right now, if you've got RHEL, for example, along with your SLES or your OEL for your Oracle databases. Actually, that's a really good one. So many people tell me, oh, no, we've standardized on this Linux. We don't have two Linux. I'm like, okay, where are your Oracle databases running? Oh, no, that's on a bunch of OEL. Okay, what versions are they? 7, 8, and 9. Okay, and you've got the Oracle management tool for that. And you've got the satellite or upstream foreman, for RHEL. And you've got, we kind of want to help you have one tool to do more of those things to make it simpler so that you can manage more things more effectively. Also, interestingly, and we have customers doing this across Australia and New Zealand, we support SLES and a few other things on ARM, on IBM mainframe, would you believe, and on IBM Power architectures, as well as x86 architectures. So we've done pretty much as much as we possibly can to support the diversity of systems. And in terms of that scale question, here's that thing I posed earlier. If you've got your SAP HANA cluster, that's absolutely mission critical. People sometimes get afraid of patching these things. They go, oh, if I patch this system and I reboot it, I have to go through a complete functional test, and I have to have 3 business analysts working all weekend to make sure that everything is exactly the same, because the whole business depends on this. There's a bunch of scale attached to managing complex systems. If you've got, 100,000 point of sale devices, as we do with some customers out there, how can I possibly get all my images and my applications out to those systems when they're running traditional single purpose applications? Both different problems to scale that we help solve. In a SUSE manager perspective, we have an architecture where we allow people to put like a proxy closer to where groups of systems are, so we can split that load for larger systems, and the proxies become kind of slaves to a master multi-Linux manager. So we've been doing that for a very long time. And obviously, SUSE being SUSE, and that amazing relationship with our SAP, we've been doing that for 1 million years too. And we can do a whole bunch of clever things around SAP and around live kernel patching and avoiding reboots. So what does that end up meaning is, you know, if you've got 1 million systems, you're constantly patching, because by the time you've finished, you kind of have to start again. Now, we're trying to make that happen much more in parallel, so there's less of a window. In terms of, say, the big complex systems, where the people are afraid to patch them, we've seen customers go from patching once a year to patching once a month for those business critical SAP systems. You know, that puts them in a much safer position all around. So, you know, different benefits, different use cases, all of which covered. In case I haven't mentioned it before, it's a multi-Linux world. We find these Linuxes in every corner. We find customers running things that are kind of almost like appliances. Oracle databases are a great case because Oracle likes them to be on Oracle Linux. And for many large customers in Australia, actually, and famously over in Germany with Deutsche Bank, we're actually looking after Oracle Linux through SUSE Multi-Linux Manager.
Michael,
Yeah,
there's a question in chat, like could you briefly explain like the licensing cost is like per server?
yes, it is. It's very simple. It's basically per managed node. So if you have 100,000 systems, there's a small increment on basically think of it like a client, a subscription for that client through the management services that we provide. What that means, the flip side of that is you can stand up as many managers as you want, and the only amount that we ask for is that subscription cost on each managed client. So some customers will have, you know, 3 for each major geo in the world, for example. You know, some will have a remote site where, you know, they only want to pull the patches once. A whole bunch of permutations possible there. So simple and flexible. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, so another view of that whole complexity that we're trying to help people manage better is, you know, this, you know, day 1 tasks, day 2 tasks. Obviously, we don't want to do things manually if we can automate them, and we don't want to do things one by one where that makes things error prone or labor intensive. Yeah, day 2 goes for longer than day 1 for any of these kinds of systems, and that's where we basically cycle through all of these things, all of these areas, and tend to do them repeatedly on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. The thing is, if we can help you do those better, you know, it's time, which is money, it's reduced complexity, which is less errors, which is better everything, which again comes to money, and is compliance, which comes to your safety and security, and in some cases, hard penalties if you're out of compliance. So it's time to drop down a little bit into more of a technical view of this. And this is one of the key concepts that you can think of, no matter where your clients are running. SUSE Multi-Linux Manager is kind of helping connect all the right repositories, wherever they're coming from, to the right clients, and then is helping you lifecycle manage through the different environments that you define. So in the first instance, from a slave's perspective, the initial repos come from the SUSE Customer Center. SUSE Multi-Linux Manager could cache them on premises. So one of the first benefits is, you know, pull once, you know, patch many on-prem. Or if you're in the public cloud and you stand up your Multi-Linux Manager in the zone that you're running in or region, you know, again, your ingress network type costs are managed there because you're only pulling the patches once. And you know, there's a whole bunch of things that come with that. And in terms of scaling, if you have a bunch of different locations, you know, we can think of the proxies as a kind of a cache or as a slave to the manager, so that we can keep that stuff close to the clients that need it. This diagram is always out of date because we're always adding new distros to this and we're always evolving. You know, when we say we support distros here, we try to keep track of the most recent versions. When something falls off the back end of this list, this doesn't mean we magically take the support out. What it means is that we might be in a position where, the functionality still works, but we may not be able to fix something that's gone wrong with an ancient distro that has fallen off the officially supported list. So yeah, it's amazing what I find when I go and talk to customers and see the great long list of things that they're managing. But this is a sample. If there are some other things that you are interested in, please let us know, because these things get here because you asked for them in all of these cases. I mentioned all the architectures. You don't have to run a separate manager for different architectures. I have a customer in Australia who runs SUSE Multi-Linux Manager on an IBM, on a SLES instance, on an IBM mainframe, and they deliver patches out to the mainframe SLES and to the x86 SLES as well. So total flexibility. Patch management. We're getting closer to the heart of things. This is the UI view. Remember that everything you see today has an API behind it, but APIs are really boring, long strings of things that don't demo very well, which is why everybody demos GUIs. And this is roughly what the core GUI looks like. And you see a lot more of this from Altan in the demo. Where people start is they typically go, that cluster problem I talked about before. They go, you know what, I'd just love to have a baseline that I know is correct, right, and then schedule the patching and see that works. And then I'm going to move into more complex. I'm going to dare to move to more complex systems management that actually matches what I really need. So, we can both identify what you've got on the systems. We can check for vulnerabilities. We can tell you what's available to fix vulnerabilities. We can, on an individual system basis, give you a single click remediate type button, which also makes for very cute demos. But what's more mature about this is when we show you how it works over time with groups of systems. So as I said, we can set up chains of actions that apply to any of those kind of groups that we've defined. We can even define a group on the fly while we're poking through the UI and go, hey, show me all the systems that are like this. Now do this thing. The chains of actions, most of which tend to be patching actions. But obviously other actions can be things like, hey, check the configuration. I've heard this kind of configuration is bad. I've talked to security. They've said there's a new vulnerability around having, setting X this way. What's our current position? How can we remediate this stuff? Obviously you don't want to do that all weekend or across all your systems. One of the ways people have addressed that in over the last few years is through automation frameworks such as Ansible. Ansible playbooks are things that we can take into the Multi-Linux Manager, and that way you don't have to rewrite your automations when you come to use our management tool. You can simply designate one of your Ansible systems as being the control node and use that to let Multi-Linux Manager control where and when the Ansible playbooks have all that automation you've already built, how we can integrate that with the new stuff that we do. On top of that, Multi-Linux Manager includes the SALT framework, which is another automation framework. We use it for a lot more than that. We actually use it for all of the communication that we do between our nodes that are managed. So you've kind of got the best of both worlds. You've got the absolute most modern automation framework that you can use. That's the basis of the automations that we've built, but you can bring what you've already built with you. Likewise, I've got customers who, they build up a system, they build up a system with Terraform, they automatically onboard it to Multi-Linux Manager. They connect to their enterprise Puppet scripts on day one to set a bunch of configurations. Then they run Ansible playbooks on day 2 and 3 to do some, drift control. But they manage it from Multi-Linux Manager, which does the patching, right? So, openness, choice, all those things, that's kind of important to us. All those things can work together. Some of you who work in regulated industries may have come across SCAP, which is the basically a domain-specific language for saying, hey, I want this setting to look like this in my system. Yeah, this is good, this is bad. Run a report, change the settings. SCAP profiles exist for various kinds of systems and various kinds of industries. You can drive those through Multi-Linux Manager. You can drive them if you've done them through Ansible. You can integrate those playbooks. And we have a nice GUI for building some of those automations baked into Multi-Linux Manager as well. Now we're going to get closer and closer to the heart of things, which is patches and packages and demos. Nothing goes to production without testing, right? So from our point of view, testing, getting things ready involves using the right tools for the right jobs. Automation is part of the picture. How you manage complex systems through their life cycle is another part of the picture. It's not just about automation. It is about this kind of thing. I want patch consistency. I want to start with a whole bunch of things in dev for a whole bunch of systems. I want to be able to apply special filters to go, hey, I have a sudden security patch. I want it to come in straight away. I want to do some testing. And then I want a single button where I can go promote all those channels to now be connected to QA and repeat and promote. And finally, we get to prod. It sounds simple, but there's a lot of moving parts to this. Another way of looking at that, I've seen people use a kind of a Spotify playlist analogy here. No one changes your playlist without your say-so, but sometimes you add a song in at the last minute because you must. This is a pattern from hundreds and thousands of SUSE customers, because it's an SAP world, but that maps very directly to this life cycle. And we just basically do the same kind of thing. And occasionally, from a SUSE perspective, but also for those of you who are running Red Hat's live patching, Oracle's implementation of live patching, we have done as SUSE consulting specialists, we have helped customers manage even those kinds of patches for HA environments using those platforms. Typically for our customers, it's like, hey, I don't want to reboot my HANA cluster because it's got a 2 terabyte in-memory database that takes a while to warm up. So please tell me which patches I can apply that don't need a reboot. And we deliver fixes for the really urgent, serious things, typically in a special way that enables us to avoid reboots. Lots of opportunity there to manage things correctly. I run through this a little bit faster than I normally would. I've done that deliberately because I want to give Altan as much time as possible on the demo. So I need to stop talking. I need to hand over to Altan.
Cool. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, hey everyone. Thanks for joining. Let me share my screen and we'll walk through deploying SUSE Manager 5. I'll explain a little bit some differences with SUSE Manager 5 as opposed to previous versions and how do you interface with it. So we'll go through. Right off the bat, I can tell you, SUSE Manager 5 introduced deployment through containers. So you're no longer installing this directly on the operating system. Let me share my terminal here and we can talk about it there. All right, so this is, I've just SSH'd into a VM. We're gonna deploy SUSE Manager on here. This is a SLES VM that I've added already. So like I said, you need container system container runtime to install SUSE Manager 5. It's the only way to install it. That also means you can't directly access, a lot of the file system. It's all running inside the container. So we'll walk through also how do you apply. One of the first things that you're going to do is install SSL certificates for the web interface. So we'll go through that example as well. And once we have it up and running, I'm going to walk through how do you bootstrap, add a new system to SUSE Manager, and what happens on the back end here when you do that. And then lastly, we will go through this content lifecycle demo where you have, let's say, a dev environment, a staging environment, a prod environment, and how do you use SUSE Manager to control which patches are going through that workflow, basically. So with that, let's get right started. So again, my starting point here is, I've already created a DNS record for my system. I've deployed /15 SB6. I've added the license. You also need to add the container modules, and you need to add the SUSE Manager module when you're deploying this. So assume all that prerequisite work is done. To deploy SUSE Manager, then first thing I'm going to do on the system is install Podman. Oops, let's just go sudo. And Podman, if you haven't worked with containers before, Podman is an alternative to Docker. So it's fully compatible with the same containers, pretty much the same commands as well. So this is a requirement. You need to install this first. Podman not found. Let me switch to root and try again. There we go. I just can't do it with sudo. So we're going to install Podman here. And you'll see it's actually quite easy now to install SUSE Manager with this new containerized setup. And that's one of the big benefits, is you don't need to worry about dependencies, anything like that, other than installing Podman runtime. So Podman is now installed. The next command we're going to run is manager admin install Podman as well. And this is basically installing the actual running container for SUSE Manager. So you do need to specify a password for the CA key. It's fine. I'll just pick something. And this is more important. You need the administrator password for the web interface. So yeah, specify something. Don't forget this. Maybe put it in your vault. So you can see it looks like deploying any container. You've seen something like this before. It's pulling down the images, multiple images, layering them, and then it's going to deploy it. It's also going to do the port mapping automatically and create a volume automatically. So it's just a single command. It's going to deploy SUSE Manager 5 for us here. Now, while this is deploying, I will say if you do intend to tackle this, be very careful about how much disk space you allocate and what your partitioning looks like. Because if you're using SUSE Manager, you're going to be pulling down a lot of packages. So depending on which Linux distros you want to patch with SUSE Manager, you can expect to add about 100 gigabytes per distribution on average, in my experience. So you can very quickly run out of disk space if you're not careful about how your partitioning looks like. So with SUSE Manager 5, then you want to make sure you have enough space under /var. The actual packages will go under /var, /lib, /containers. Should finish up in a second, and then we will log into it and get certificates applied to it.
For those of you who may have had some background experience with RHEL satellite or Foreman, you'll see, satellite particularly, you'll see Spacewalk down here. Back in the ancient times, SUSE actually forked the Spacewalk project, and SUSE Multi-Linux Manager has evolved from that through to the current Uni project. So that's why you see, those of you who have that background, see that thing there, because there is a bunch of that stuff still there.
Thanks, Michael. So that's finished. It's fully deployed now at this point. If I just run podman ps, you can see the container is running, right? If you've used Docker, it's the same command, docker ps, podman ps. Now it's running in a container. So if we want to get access to the container itself, you can open a terminal with a command like this, manager control term, and that's how we log into the container now. All the commands I run here now are running inside the container. But let's log back out really quickly first. I'll go through this next example, and that's just deploying certificates. Because right now it's up and running, but I don't have valid certificates on the web interface. So let's just do that really quickly. And I use this little tool called acme.sh. It basically just automates Let's Encrypt certificates. All right, and then reload that to update the aliases. And deploying the cert is pretty straightforward as well with this tool. I'm just going to say issue, D for domain, the DNS that I already have set up. And we're going to say use the validation of DNS, not HTTP validation. If you've done any Let's Encrypt certs, you'll know the default is to use HTTP, but the better, more recommended way is to use DNS. And we have our DNS zone on Azure, so I'm going to specify that. And lastly, this tool supports multiple CAs, like Zero, SSL, Let's Encrypt, and a couple others as well. We're going to specify which one to use. I just find Let's Encrypt is more widely accepted. The root cert is more widely accepted. Let me just double check. One other item for this is we need to set up the vars, which I should have already set up. Oh, okay, I shouldn't be running this as root. Let me try this again as non-root. All right, cool. And then the same command again to issue the certificate for my SUSE Manager web interface. 2.5 tux42. DNS is DNS Azure. And this supports other DNS providers as well, AWS, Google Cloud, DigitalOcean. Okay, let's try reloading that with the paths being updated. So yeah, the authentication for the DNS is done through environment variables, which I had already set up in advance here. Now, for a lot of you using SUSE Manager, you might just be most likely going to be getting certificates from your internal CA. You can obviously do that. It's just for the demo purposes. It's just easier to do Let's Encrypt certs. So it's deployed these 4 cert files for me, right? So I have, this is the main certificate for the web interface. This is the private key. This is actually the intermediate certificate. And this is the full chain, which combines those. So we actually don't need this one. But when you do apply these certs to SUSE Manager, there's one more key that you need, one more certificate, and that's the top level root certificate. And that's called the ISRG root X1 cert. And that's publicly available, so we're gonna grab that manually with just wget. Let me just go and place this all in the same folder. So yeah, that's the root cert I'm trying to get. And yeah, there we go. So we have all the files that we need. Now I need to copy the files into the SUSE Manager container, the podman container. And you can do that with a command that's called mgr copy. So I'll say, let's copy the CA, that's the intermediate cert. And the format is you also, for the destination, you type server, // and then the path for it. So I'm just copying it into the temp folder inside the container. Ooh, for this one, we need to be root, I believe. Let's see if sudo works. Yep, that worked. So number 1, the intermediate cert is there. The server cert is now copied there. The private key is now copied in there. and the isrg root cert is copied in there. And you need all 4 of these because you need to establish the full chain. So I've copied it in there. The reason I'm showing all this is different now that it's running in a container, right? Typically, before this, you wouldn't have to worry about all these copying inside the container and using this terminal inside the container. But this is how you do it now and moving forward, SUSE Manager 5 and 5.1. So I've copied it in. Let's apply the search now. So we're going to go back to the terminal command. In the container, we're going to use a command called mgr ssl search setup. And the thing I like about this command is very self-explanatory once you run the help for it. So it expects a couple of arguments here, and you'll notice that these will map to the files that we just copied over. So you need a root CA file, you need an intermediate file, server certificate file, and the server key file. So I copied all those in the temp folder. They should be in here. Let's just clean this up so we have a nice list. There we go. Those are the 4 key files that we copied here. So yeah, let's specify them all then. -R will be the root CA file. That's the isrg root. -I will be the intermediate cert, and that's the ca.cert file. And -S will be the server certificate. So that's summa 5 CER. And lastly, the key file, -K. All right, so this command will basically grab those certs. It's going to validate them. So if there's something wrong with the chain and the trust, it will tell you right here. But it looks like it worked. There's nothing wrong here. Yeah, that should be bad. Now I'll just restart this and then we'll go to the web interface. Let me share the web browser. Summa 5. So this one should come up shortly. It's still booting up, but I do have another server set up because the next step takes several hours. So we don't have time to pull all the patches down on a new SUSE Manager. So yeah, we'll move forward with this one. But once this comes up, I'll just show you that the certificate basically worked. Now, the next thing I want to show you, one of the other things, first things you're going to do when you deploy SUSE Manager and you've deployed the certificate, you're going to need to go into the admin menu here and go to organization credentials. And you have to add your organization credentials here before you can start pulling down products and packages here. So I've already done that here, but for you, you can find them in the customer center for yourself. Once you add it in here, the next step is to add the distros here. So this one's interesting because it's going to be different for each one of you. It depends on which Linux distros you're running and you want to patch. This also gives you a good idea of what's supported and what's available, right? So if I search for Debian, you can see which ones are supported. You can add them, and you can also see that I've added support for Debian 11. What do I mean by adding support here? You need the product added for both patching as well as bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is just adding the system to SUSE Manager. That's why this is one of the first things you need to do, because without this step, you can't add any systems to SUSE Manager. So I've added Debian 1, right? You can see there's OpenSUSE supported here. There's SUSE Linux obviously supported here. Alma Linux, CentOS, Oracle Linux, and RHEL, right? All the major distros are pretty much supported over here. Like even Amazon Linux, for example. So anyway, I have what I'll be going through is the OpenSUSE Leap distros. So let's say I've added this now. It will take maybe like an hour if you add one, if you have good internet connection. And you'll have to come back here and check that it is indeed completed. You'll see a
Yeah.
green check mark next to it.
This is the classic first step when you start up and you're syncing all those repositories and images that you need from wherever they're coming from. You know, the SUSE commercial ones are coming from suc.suse.com. It's actually probably a good place to stick my nose in and just point out that Multi-Linux Manager manages all these distros. If you have a commercial distribution such as Red Hat, you know, those patches need to come via your subscription with Red Hat. There is also an option for SUSE to take on support for your Red Hat systems, and in that case, we turn it into what you see here as a Liberty system, and you get a republished repository from SUSE's backend, basically. So support, management, slightly different things. We can do both, but yeah, this is the tool for managing it all. So.
Cool. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, and this just to wrap up the previous thing we were demoing. Yeah, you can see SUSE Manager 5 is now up. Certificate is valid, so that's all completed. Okay, so let's say we've added the support for our distros now. The next step that you probably want to do is you want to add some systems to SUSE Manager. And this is what we mean by bootstrapping system on here. To add a system here, I will add the client 8. And this is OpenSUSE that I've deployed here, so I have it already added. You can specify the root password, or you can specify a different user as long as it has full access, right? And if you don't want to deal with passwords, obviously you can also use SSH private keys over here. So you can generate a key pair, and as long as it has access, SUSE Manager will be able to log into that system and bootstrap it. But I'll use a password here for simplicity's sake. And once I hit bootstrap, so a couple interesting things happen here. So it's taking control of the system, right? What does that mean actually for the repositories? Let's go back to the terminal really quickly. It might take another minute to refresh, but this is the default list of repositories on OpenSUSE, right? So you can see which ones are enabled, which ones are not enabled, and you can list this with zipper LR, so list repos. So main repo, there's an update repo or source repo. Some are disabled, some are enabled, and they have the GPG check as well as the refresh column. Now I'm showing you this because this will very quickly change as soon as you bootstrap a system to SUSE Manager. The whole idea here is that SUSE Manager will take control of the repositories and what is actually exposed and available to the system. So let me just double check if that finished. It usually takes about a minute, but it might still be going. So yeah, there you go. You can see now the difference between the top side and the bottom side, right? You can see it disabled all of the default repositories, package repositories on my OpenSUSE Leap. And it added additional repos here that are pointing directly to my SUSE Manager. So here SUSE Manager is acting sort of as a proxy, right? So SUSE Manager is pulling all of the same packages from the upstream, from the actual repositories for OpenSUSE. And then all the systems that I bootstrap, they're going to be getting their packages from SUSE Manager now instead of the main public repos. And that's what allows us to do the next step, the content lifecycle and controlling the filtering and all that stuff, which I'll show you next as well. So right now we haven't even done any content lifecycle setup. I'll show you that next. Before I do that, let's just do zipper refresh just to see how many packages we actually have available. How many updates we have available. And I'll do that with terminal froze there for a second. All right, so while that's kind of frozen, let's go back and share the web interface and let's talk about content lifecycle. So, okay, let's say we have the systems now added. So if I don't add it to a content lifecycle project, it's just going to act like a proxy, right? It's just going to show it the same packages that you have on the public side. And that is basically synchronized on a daily basis. So as new packages get released on the upstream repo, SUSE Manager will synchronize with that on a daily basis. But we want more control than that, right? We don't want, especially for critical environments, we want to make sure that we have, that we know which packages are made available. Right, the example that Michael gave earlier, that there's a new package available while you're going through your dev upgrades. Maybe you're upgrading, 100 systems. During that process, you will have new packages available. So now it's no longer a like for like system. So that's where the content lifecycle feature comes in play. So to start with, we'll go into content lifecycle on the left-hand side in SUSE Manager. We're going to create a new project just to show you what that looks like. Oh, I think, yep, there we go. It's a minor keyboard issue. So we've created a project, right? Next up, we're going to add some sources. So these are the upstream channels. This acts as our baseline, basically. I can add Debian here. I can add OpenSUSE and Ubuntu. Those are the three sources that I've already added to the SUSE Manager. I'll add OpenSUSE because that's what my client is. I can add more control here. If I had child channels, if I had additional repos, I can add all of that here as a baseline. But let's just add it as it is. So I'll pause here. We're going to add a filter next, but even if I don't add a filter, even the way this is set up right now, it's going to give me some benefit because it gives me a lot more control. Meaning if I do need to patch 1,000 systems, right, it's scalable. It's not going to change until I'm ready to change it. So you're not going to get that problem anymore because once I hit build, it's going to be a static set of packages that are available, and that's not going to change until I change that myself.
Point-in-time snapshot, yeah.
Yep, exactly. But let's say we want to add some filters. Let's say I don't want to include any Python updates, right? I have a filter here. I'll show you what that looks like. Skip Python. And you can filter by package name, by build date, by advisory. There's many different options here. Package. If the package name contains Python, I'm just going to skip those for now. Additionally, if the package name contains kernel firmware, I'm going to skip those for now as well. So I have the sources added, I have the filters added. Next up, I need to add my environments. So let's say we have a dev environment first. And then we have a staging or QA environment. And the order that they're displayed here matters, right? That's the same order in which the patches will flow through. So prod is last, and it shows up at the bottom. So this flows from top down, right? So we have our packages here, our package repo. We have a filter to really control, what to exclude here. So we have a nice control list. We're going to build that, and that's going to go first into this dev environment, right? You can see it's not built right now. And then once we're happy with the results from the dev environment, we can hit promote and push that to the staging environment. And then moving on to the prod environment after that. As you make changes to the builds or the filters, it's going to version it for you. So you have that history, and you can write a little summary message here as well, similar to Git commit messages, just to remind you what you actually changed in this last version, this last iteration. Python and kernel. Firmware. Now, once I hit build over here, it's going to be cloning the channels based on the filters that I have. What it's not doing, it's not going to copy all over the file. So, if I have 100 gigabytes of repo data packages, it's not going to be copying the packages themselves. It's only going to be copying the metadata. So it doesn't take a lot of disk space. Another thing this does, as soon as I start building these environments, like this one's building the first one, it's going to create another another repository endpoint for us here. And we need to associate systems with that. So let's go to our systems list. And this was the system that we had added earlier. You can see there's about 296 packages available. So this is by default without the filter, right? I haven't added this to that project or the content lifecycle yet. The way to do that is to go to the system, go to software channels, and then you can change the channels. Right now it's on the base channel. I can change it. You can see these channels were created automatically, right? So I have this open SUSE demo dev. This is the one that I just created, and that's based on the content lifecycle project. So I'll just associate this system with that channel.
Yes, as we're waiting for that to load, I guess after this webinar, we'll be sending out a few pieces of content to you all. So the recording, as well as like where you can actually get SUSE Manager, so you can follow along at home. We'll also be sending a few case studies. So one of the things that we at Adfinis have done is we've worked with a Swiss company called Volio. So they're a healthcare company, and we've helped them really reduce the amount of work that is required to apply major patches to the entire Linux environment. So we're doing it 84% faster. So previously it took them 25 hours to apply major patches, and we've taken that down to 4 hours. But over to you, Alton.
All right, cool. Yeah, for the sake of time, I'll just show the last bit really quickly. Yeah, once that's done, the repository itself will change on the system. So if you run zipper lr, you will see that it's now pointing to this demo dev environment. And basically the idea here is I'll finish the patching. Because of the filter that I added, there's going to be no kernel images, no kernel firmware or Python image packages available. So I won't be updating those. And we'll move on, promote that to the staging environment and promote it to prod. And once again, to drive the point home, we won't have that problem of packages changing as we're going through the updates. Even if this takes me 6 months, I have very hard control over which packages are going to each environment. The last thing I just want to show here is you can also utilize the GUI here to update the system or install a package or something like that. Right, so you can see which packages are available. You can see which upgrades are available for this system, and I can actually just upgrade things directly from the GUI here as well. If you have any use case for that at all, obviously you shouldn't. Typically you'd be doing it by command line. You don't have to update packages one by one, but you can see things here, and you can actually make changes here as well. You can install packages or upgrade packages. Like so. And just reload this to see if it's finished building. Yeah, this one does take a minute or two. But yeah, I hope that makes sense. The use case makes sense. It makes sense to me because I've run into that problem myself, patching systems, even going from one weekend to the next weekend. There's newer packages released every day, so you need to have some control for that.
There's also a question in the chat as well. So
okay, let's see.
Yeah. I suppose from my perspective, and I'm just replying to the question here, Multi-Linux Manager is not really about managing Nutanix or VMware as hypervisors. It's about managing guest OSs. If your guest is running on Nutanix, if your guest is running on VMware, that's fine by us. And we're managing that client VM. So think of it at that level. Yeah.
Solely server-based?
In the sense of physical servers, so an OS running on bare metal, or guest VM. Yeah. Oh, so Jeff is saying that he can hear. Yeah, Jeff is having an audio problem. He can hear Stephen and myself, but not Alton, which is weird because Stephen is currently on mute. So, I'm sorry, Jeff. I don't know what to do about that.
Yep, we'll send a recording around as
Yeah.
well after this call with all the materials. So hopefully that helps.
All right, cool. Yeah, just to wrap this up, yeah, you can see it finished. I'll share the terminal one more time. So I did promote it to the staging environment. We'll do the same thing with prod, but we don't have to wait around for that. Just to show you lastly on the terminal what you see once we have added the system to the project, the content lifecycle. If I just run zipper lr to list the repos, you can see the repo names also changed. So now it's specifically pointing to the OpenSUSE demo dev environment for that content lifecycle. So this is much more static now than what I had earlier. These were the base repos. They would still get updated on like a daily basis, syncing from the upstream. But these are based on my project. They will not change until I promote or make changes myself to that content lifecycle project. So then I would then over here just do zipper refresh. And then update. Let's just see which packages it makes available for me. And you can see there's no Python packages over here. There's no kernel firmware packages over here. Yeah, I'll end over here. I think we've finished the demo on my side at least.
Awesome. Thank you, Alton. Thank you, Michael. Thank you all for joining on our Multi-Linux Manager. We'll be sending out a few pieces of material. Feel free to reach out to us, both SUSE and Adfinis, if you have any further questions. But yeah, like I would encourage you to really do a proof of concept in your own systems. We're here to help and see how can we help you really reduce the time it takes to really manage your Linux estate. So with that, Adrian, thank you. And yeah, have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.